November 17, 1944. A ridge overlooking the German town of Eschweiler. Staff Sergeant James Rothery crept his Sherman forward, inch by inch, watching the skyline through his periscope. Behind him sat 33 tons of American steel. Ahead, somewhere in the industrial haze, German Panthers waited. He had learned the hard way what happened when you exposed your Sherman's silhouette against the sky. 3 days ago, his platoon leader had crested a similar ridge too fast. The Panther's 75mm gun had found them at 1,800 yards. The loader never made it out. Rothery positioned his tank just below the crest. The turret barely cleared the ridgeline. His gunner, Corporal Mitchell, peered through the sight, scanning for movement. The radio crackled. Contact. Panthers, 1,100 yards, moving left to right. Rothery gave the order. The Sherman lurched forward just enough to bring the gun to bear. Mitchell fired. The 76mm round streaked down range. Before the smoke cleared, before they could see if the shot connected, Rothery shouted the command every Sherman crew had learned to obey without question. Reverse. Hard. The driver slammed the tank into reverse gear. The Sherman rolled backward down the slope, disappearing behind the protecting ridgeline in seconds. A German round screamed overhead, exactly where they had been moments before. They were alive because they had moved. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. What Rothery had just executed was not desperation, it was doctrine, a carefully developed tactical innovation that would help American tank crews survive against technically superior German armor. The technique had no official name in the field manuals. Tankers simply called it shoot and scoot, fire from a hull-down position, then immediately reverse to safety before the enemy could return fire. It sounds simple. It was not. It required split-second timing, perfect crew coordination, and intimate knowledge of terrain. Most critically, it required a tank designed to do something German tanks could not. It required a tank that could actually reverse quickly and reliably. The Sherman's reverse gear capability would prove to be one of its most important tactical advantages. Not its armor, not its gun, the ability to back up fast enough to save your life. By late 1944, American tank crews had transformed a transmission specification into a combat technique that German tankers could not replicate. This is the story of how American ingenuity turned a defensive limitation into an offensive weapon. The mathematics of tank combat in Western Europe were brutally simple. German Panthers could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor from over 2,000 meters. A Sherman's standard 75mm gun could not penetrate a Panther's frontal armor at any practical range. Even the improved 76mm gun struggled against Panther frontal armor beyond 500 yards. The Sherman's frontal glacis armor was 63.5mm thick, sloped at 47 degrees. This provided effective protection of roughly 93mm against armor-piercing rounds, adequate against older German tanks, useless against the Panther's high-velocity gun. The Panther's frontal glacis measured 80mm at 55 degrees. Effective thickness exceeded 139mm. The turret front was 100mm. American tankers understood these numbers intimately. They understood that fighting Panthers frontally at long range was suicide. So, they stopped fighting frontally at long range. They developed tactics that negated the Panthers' advantages, tactics that exploited terrain, tactics that relied on the Sherman's unexpected strengths. Most importantly, tactics that kept them alive long enough to win battles through superior numbers, logistics, and crew training. The hull-down position became the Sherman's equalizer. The technique was ancient. Infantry had used terrain to mask their positions for centuries. Tanks had employed similar methods since World War I. But the Sherman made hull-down fighting an art form. The tactic required specific conditions: terrain with elevation changes, ridgelines, hills, reverse slopes. The Sherman would position itself just behind the crest of a hill. Only the turret was exposed, the hull hidden behind the protecting terrain. From this position, The Sherman could observe and engage enemy armor while presenting the smallest possible target. The majority of the tank's mass remained protected behind solid earth. A German gunner facing a hull-down Sherman had only the turret to aim at, roughly 3 square meters of target instead of 15, and that turret was the Sherman's strongest armor. The gun mantlet on most Sherman variants measured between 76 and 91 millimeters. The turret front was 76 millimeters. Not impenetrable, but far stronger than the hull sides or rear. The Sherman possessed a crucial advantage for hull-down fighting that German tankers could not match: gun depression, the ability to angle the main gun downward. The Sherman's main gun could depress 12 degrees below horizontal. 12 degrees may sound modest. It was revolutionary. That degree of depression meant the Sherman could position itself on the reverse side of a slope, with only the turret clearing the crest. The tank itself could sit in a protected position while the gun engaged targets downslope. German Panthers, by contrast, managed only 5 to 8 degrees of depression depending on turret position. Soviet 34s had even worse depression, limited to 3 to 5 degrees by their low-profile turrets. The design difference was fundamental. American tank designers had prioritized crew space and internal ergonomics. The Sherman's turret ring was relatively large. The turret interior had room for the gun breech to recoil without hitting the turret roof when depressed. German tanks, optimized for low profiles and maximum armor protection, sacrificed gun depression for reduced height. The Panther's compressed turret interior left no space for the breech to move when the barrel pointed down. Soviet designers accepted even worse trade-offs, creating tanks so low-slung that hull-down positions on reverse slopes were nearly impossible to utilize effectively. This engineering choice gave American crews options German tankers did not have. A Sherman could use terrain that Panthers could not. Rolling hills became an American advantage. Reverse slopes became fighting positions. Any piece of ground with elevation change became an opportunity to equalize the fight. Technical Staff Sergeant Robert Early of the 3rd Armored Division explained the technique in a letter written in March 1945. The Panther has better armor and a better gun, but it can't shoot what it can't see, and it can't hide where we can hide. We learn to use every bump in the ground. The Germans have to show their whole hull to shoot downslope. We show only our turret. The process of taking a hull-down position required careful execution. The tank commander would identify suitable terrain through reconnaissance, a ridge line that provided cover from one direction while allowing fields of fire toward enemy positions. The Sherman would approach from the protected side, moving up the reverse slope. As the tank crept forward, the driver maintained precise control of speed and position. The gunner watched through the gun sight. When the gun barrel could just clear the crest, when the sight picture showed the target area, the driver halted. The Sherman was now hull down. From this position, the crew had enormous advantages. The enemy had difficulty acquiring the Sherman as a target. The small turret presented against a background of earth made visual detection challenging. German rangefinders struggled to get accurate distance measurements on partial targets. If the Sherman fired first, the muzzle flash gave away its position. But by then, the American crew had already begun their next crucial move. They reversed. The Sherman's transmission was manufactured by multiple American companies using a design that originated with Spicer. The transmission provided 5 forward speeds and 1 reverse speed. All forward speeds except first gear had synchromesh. This meant the driver did not need to double clutch. Shifting was smooth and fast, similar to civilian automobiles of the period. The reverse gear ratio was 5.65 to 1. This was nearly as high as first gear's ratio of 7.56 to 1. The high gear ratio meant strong mechanical advantage. The Sherman could reverse up steep grades. More importantly, it could accelerate backward quickly. In practice, a Sherman in reverse gear could reach 2 to 3 miles per hour almost immediately, faster than a man could sprint. Fast enough to drop behind the protecting ridgeline in 4 to 5 seconds. Those seconds were the difference between survival and destruction. When a Sherman fired from hull down and immediately reversed, German gunners faced a problem with no solution. Their return fire arrived where the Sherman had been, not where it was. The time required for a German crew to observe the muzzle flash, identify the target location, traverse the turret, aim, and fire was typically 8 to 12 seconds for a well-trained crew. The Sherman was behind cover in 5. Compare this to the Panther's reverse capability. The Panther used a complex 7-speed synchro-mesh transmission manufactured by ZF. On paper, the transmission was advanced. In reality, it was a nightmare. The reverse gear was slow and difficult to engage. Panthers could barely manage 1 to 2 miles per hour in reverse. Backing up a hill was nearly impossible. When a Panther exposed itself to fire, it had 2 options: continue advancing to find better cover ahead, or pivot the entire vehicle 90 degrees and drive forward to the flank. Both options took time. Both kept the Panther exposed. Neither allowed the quick disengagement that saved Sherman crews. Lieutenant Raymond Dunnigan of the 4th Armoured Division wrote to his brother in August 1944, describing the tactical implications. The German tanks are magnificent machines when they can position themselves in good defensive locations and wait for us. They outrange us, and their armour is nearly impenetrable from the front, but they cannot reposition quickly once engaged. If we can force them to react, to move, to adjust, we gain the advantage. A Panther backing up looks like a building sliding down a hill, painfully slow. Often the driver panic shifts and stalls the engine entirely. We shoot and scoot, they shoot and die. The shoot and scoot tactic required more than just reverse capability. It demanded crew coordination that American training emphasized but German training often neglected. The tank commander had to identify the ridgeline and select the exact position. Too far back, and the gun could not engage targets. Too far forward, and the hull was exposed. The driver had to inch the Sherman up the slope with perfect throttle control. The gunner had to be ready to fire the moment the sight picture appeared. The loader had to have the next round ready before the first shot's recoil had even stopped. When the order came to reverse, every crew member reacted instantly. The commander is monitoring the return fire. The gunner kept the sight on target as long as possible. The loader is preparing for the next round. The driver executed the reverse without hesitation. The bow gunner watched for infantry threats on the flanks. 5 men acting as one organism. American tank training emphasized this crew coordination relentlessly. At Fort Knox, Sherman crews drilled these movements until they became muscle memory. Individual tank gunnery, crew drills, simulated combat scenarios. The emphasis was always on teamwork, communication, and speed. German Panther crews, by contrast, faced dramatically shortened training as the war progressed. By late 1944, Panther crews might receive only a few weeks of training before being sent to the front. They learned to operate the controls. They learned to fire the gun. They did not have time to develop the seamless crew coordination that complex tactics demanded. French forces who operated captured Panthers after the war documented this problem extensively. A 1947 French technical report on the Panther noted that poor crew training was a principal cause of mechanical failures and tactical defeats. The Panther requires experienced crews who understand its limitations and can work around its mechanical fragility. German crews late in the war possessed neither the experience nor the training time to develop proper technique. The psychological advantage of the shoot and scoot tactic cannot be overstated. Sherman crews who mastered the technique gained confidence. They understood they had a method to fight Panthers and win. The tactic transformed the Sherman from a supposed death trap into a tactical problem that could be solved with skill and terrain. Corporal Wilbert Richards, driver for the legendary tanker Lafayette Poole, explained the mental shift in an oral history recorded in 1982. When we first started fighting Panthers, every crew member felt that cold fear. We knew the numbers. We knew they could kill us before we could hurt them. Then Poole taught us how to use terrain and how to move. Suddenly we were hunting them instead of being hunted. The Panther was still a dangerous animal, but we had learned how to cage it. The terrain of Western Europe provided countless opportunities for hull-down positions. The bocage of Normandy with its earthen banks, the rolling hills of eastern France, the ridge lines of the Ardennes, the elevated road networks of the Rhineland. American tank commanders learned to read terrain like a language. Every map study became an exercise in identifying potential hull-down positions. Every approach to a new sector included reconnaissance to locate the best fighting positions. Every defensive layout incorporated carefully selected spots where Shermans could engage from protection. Tank recovery teams played a crucial role in the shoot and scoot system. When a Sherman took a position on a ridge, recovery vehicles positioned themselves on the reverse slope. If the Sherman was hit and disabled, the recovery team could quickly tow it backward to safety. This was possible because the Sherman was moving backward to begin with. A disabled tank just behind a ridge could be pulled to safety in minutes. A disabled tank on flat ground in front of German positions was lost. The asymmetry was striking. American armored operations included dedicated recovery assets, tank retrieval vehicles based on Sherman chassis, tank transporters, mobile workshops. The entire logistics system supported the tactical doctrine of aggressive advance, defensive positioning, and rapid withdrawal when necessary. German armored operations, especially late in the war, possessed no equivalent system. Panthers broke down far from friendly lines. They ran out of fuel in exposed positions. They were abandoned by crews who could not repair them. Even when Panthers were only lightly damaged, recovery was often impossible. American forces would find intact Panthers with thrown tracks or dead batteries sitting abandoned because no recovery vehicle could reach them. The shoot and scoot tactic worked because everything around it worked. The transmission was reliable. The crew was trained. The recovery assets were available. The logistics system delivered fuel and ammunition. The tactics manual emphasized the technique. The institutional culture supported adaptation and innovation. The Battle of Ardennes in September 1944 demonstrated the effectiveness of these tactics in actual combat. The 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A, under Colonel Bruce Clark, faced elements of the 5th Panzer Army. German forces included the newly formed 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, equipped with Panther tanks. On paper, German forces held significant advantages: more tanks, better tanks, interior lines. The German command expected to crush the American spearhead. Instead, American crews using proper tactical employment devastated the German armor. Combat Command A positioned Shermans on terrain of their choosing. Ridge lines overlooking German approach routes, reverse slopes that masked Sherman positions, hull-down spots that allowed first shot opportunities. When German Panthers advanced on September 18th, they encountered what appeared to be. Then Shermans appeared on ridge lines, fired, and disappeared. Panthers that attempted to engage found nothing to shoot at. The American tanks had already reversed to safety. German forces made repeated attempts to attack through September 29th. Each attack followed similar patterns. Panthers advanced in column formations on predictable routes. American observers on forward slopes radioed positions to hull down Shermans on reverse slopes. The Shermans crept forward, acquired targets, fired, and immediately reversed. German return fire consistently arrived seconds too late. The results were decisive. Combat Command A destroyed over 75 German tanks and armored vehicles, while losing fewer than 25 Shermans. The kill ratio favored the supposedly inferior American tanks by more than 3-1. Post-war analysis of the battle emphasized that American success resulted not from superior equipment, but from superior tactical employment. General Bruce Clark later stated, "The Panther was the better tank in a static slugging match. But tank combat is not static, it is fluid. The side that can move and shoot and move again wins. The Sherman gave us that flexibility. The Panther did not." The shoot and scoot technique became so effective that German forces began to recognize and fear it. German after-action reports from late 1944 specifically warned about American tanks using hull-down positions and rapid displacement. Wehrmacht tactical bulletins advised Panther crews to avoid engaging American tanks positioned on ridge lines unless absolutely necessary. The recommendation was to call in artillery or infantry support rather than risk a direct tank versus tank engagement under disadvantageous conditions. This represented a complete reversal from the early war period when German tank doctrine emphasized aggressive direct engagement. The technique extended beyond purely defensive applications. American crews learned to use shoot and scoot offensively. A platoon of Shermans would advance through terrain, leapfrogging from one hull-down position to the next. The lead tank would take position on a ridge, observe the terrain ahead. If German armor appeared, engage from the protected position, then reverse and let the next Sherman take the forward position. This rotating advance kept at least one Sherman in a protected firing position at all times, while the platoon continued moving forward. German forces found this tactic almost impossible to counter. Concentrating fire on one Sherman was useless because it would immediately reverse. Trying to outflank the position exposed the flanking force to the other Shermans in the platoon. The December 1944 German offensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, tested American defensive tactics under extreme pressure. German forces achieved surprise. They had numerical superiority in the initial assault. They had King Tigers, Panthers, and Panzer IVs in significant numbers. American forces were caught off balance, undermanned, and spread thin. Yet American tank crews held critical positions through proper tactical employment. The defense of Elsenborn Ridge provides a clear example. American forces occupied ridge lines overlooking German approach routes. Sherman tanks from multiple battalions took hull-down positions along the ridge. German armor attempting to break through had to advance uphill through open ground while American tanks fired from protected positions. The 741st Tank Battalion played a crucial role in this defense. Lieutenant Colonel William Duncan positioned his Shermans carefully. Every tank had a prepared position with overhead cover if possible. Every position had a clear avenue of retreat. Every crew knew the exact reverse route to secondary positions if their primary position was compromised. German attacks began on December 17th. Panthers and King Tigers advanced with infantry support. American Shermans engaged from hull-down positions at maximum effective range. The German tanks could see muzzle flashes but could not clearly identify target positions against the background terrain. American tanks fired, reversed, repositioned, and engaged again. The pattern repeated through December 18th and 19th. German forces made minimal progress despite repeated assaults. American tank casualties were surprisingly light. Most hit Shermans were able to reverse to safety and be recovered for repair. By December 20th, German momentum in this sector had stalled completely. The Elsenborn Ridge held. American defensive success was not due to superior numbers or equipment. It was due to proper tactical employment of available resources. Shermans fought from positions that minimized their vulnerabilities and maximized their advantages. The ability to shoot and immediately reverse to safety saved crew after crew. Staff Sergeant James Rothery survived the war. He commanded 3 different Sherman tanks, each knocked out in combat but with the crew escaping. In a late-life interview with his grandson, he reflected on the technique that kept him alive. People who never served in tanks think bravery means charging forward into enemy fire. Real tank fighting is more like boxing. You hit and move. You don't stand there trading punches with someone bigger and stronger. We learned to use our tank's strengths against the enemy's weaknesses. The Sherman could back up fast. The Panther could not. That difference saved my life multiple times. The first time my tank was hit, we had just reversed from a hull-down position. The German shot hit our original position. We were already gone. If we had stayed there to admire our own shooting, we would all be dead. The transmission that made this possible was not particularly advanced. It was simply well-designed, reliable, and manufactured to proper tolerances. The Spicer transmission used straightforward spur gears. The synchromesh system was adapted from automobile technology. Everything was built by companies experienced in mass production. Quality control was consistent. Parts from different manufacturers were interchangeable. When a transmission failed, which was rare, replacement took less than a day. Maintenance was straightforward. American mechanics with basic automotive training could service Sherman transmissions in the field. The Panther transmission, by contrast, represented German over-engineering at its worst. The ZF synchromesh transmission was sophisticated. It was also complex, difficult to manufacture, and prone to failure. The reverse gear, in particular, was notoriously problematic. The gear engagement mechanism was finicky. Cold weather made shifting worse. The high gear ratio necessary to move the Panther's 45 tons meant enormous stress on components designed for lighter vehicles. The transmission had been engineered for a 30 to 35-ton tank. Hitler's demand for additional armor during development pushed the final weight to 45 tons. The transmission was never redesigned to accommodate the increased load. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The result was predictable mechanical failure. Panthers that attempted to reverse up slopes often stripped gears. The complex shifter linkage would bind. Crews would panic shift, grinding gears and causing damage. Experienced crews learned not to rely on reverse at all. They would plan positions where they could drive forward to safety if engaged. This fundamentally limited tactical options. A Panther crew had to think several moves ahead, like chess. If we position here, where can we drive forward if we need to retreat? American Sherman crews could take positions that German tanks could not. Any spot with a protected reverse slope became viable. The German crew's question was, can we retreat forward from here? The American crew's question was simpler. Is there a ridge line to hide behind when we back up? One question severely limited tactical options, the other opened them up. Eastern Front reports confirmed the same limitations. Soviet forces occasionally captured Panthers and attempted to use them against German forces. Soviet crews praised the Panther's gun and armor. They universally complained about the transmission and especially the reverse capability. A February 1945 report from the 4th Tank Corps described a captured Panther used in a reconnaissance mission. The experienced Soviet crew successfully attacked and destroyed 3 German Panthers from a flanking position. During the retreat to Soviet lines, the Panther was hit by German artillery and damaged. The after-action report noted, "The Panther proved effective in attack but difficult to maneuver defensively. The reverse capability is inadequate for tactical withdrawal under fire." The vehicle was subsequently written off due to transmission damage and lack of spare parts. The French Army's post-war evaluation of captured Panthers reached identical conclusions. French tankers testing Panthers in 1946 and 1947 conducted standard tactical exercises. They attempted to use Panthers in hull-down positions with shoot-and-scoot techniques. The results were consistently poor. The Panthers could take hull-down positions. They could fire effectively, but they could not reverse quickly enough to execute the withdrawal phase. French tank officers noted in their reports that the Panther required different tactical employment than the Sherman. The Panther worked best in prepared static defensive positions where it would not need to reverse. The Sherman could fight from positions that required rapid movement backward. This gave the Sherman tactical flexibility the Panther could not match. British forces conducted similar evaluations. After capturing multiple Panthers during the Northwest Europe campaign, British armoured units tested captured vehicles extensively. The British had used American-supplied Shermans throughout the war and understood the Sherman's tactical advantages. When they tested Panthers, British crews immediately noted the reverse speed limitation. A British technical report from 1948 stated, "The Panther's inability to reverse at adequate speed severely limits its tactical employment. British armour doctrine emphasises mobility and rapid position changes. The Panther cannot execute standard British tactics. It would require entirely new tactical doctrine, written specifically around the vehicle's limitations." This was the deeper truth about tank combat in World War II. Individual specifications mattered far less than systemic integration. The Sherman's reverse capability was meaningless in isolation. Combined with proper tactics, adequate training, supporting logistics, recovery assets, and terrain intelligence, it became a war-winning advantage. The Panther's superior frontal armor was meaningless if the Panther could not reposition when outflanked. The Panther's excellent gun was meaningless if the crew could not acquire targets that appeared briefly and then vanished. American tankers understood this instinctively. They had learned through experience that tank combat was not about technical specifications. It was about combined arms coordination, crew skill, tactical employment, and maintaining operational tempo. The Sherman fit into this system perfectly. It was not the best tank. It was a good enough tank operated by well-trained crews within a superior system. That combination defeated technically superior German armor repeatedly. American armor doctrine explicitly stated that medium tanks were not intended to fight heavy tanks alone. Tank destroyers, artillery, air support, and infantry were meant to neutralize heavy armor. Medium tanks exploited breakthroughs, supported infantry, and engaged targets of opportunity. But when Shermans did have to fight Panthers and Tigers, they had tactics that worked: hull-down positioning, shoot and scoot, rapid displacement, flanking maneuvers. All these techniques relied fundamentally on one unglamorous capability. The Sherman could back up quickly and reliably. The transmission that delivered this capability cost far less to manufacture than the Panther's sophisticated gearbox. It lasted longer. It required less maintenance. It could be repaired by moderately skilled mechanics, and it saved the lives of thousands of American tankers who learned to shoot, reverse, and live to fight another day. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.